Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us here. We are very thrilled to have you here. And I want to introduce myself. My name is Husam Hilal. I'm a partner solution architect at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for the last 6 years. And the last 3 years, I've been heavily focused on Azure VMware Solution. With me, I have my best colleague that I've been working on all the time on Azure VMware Solution, the god of the landing zone accelerator, Prasad.
Thank you, Husam. That's the best introduction. Hope everybody can hear me. Okay, awesome. With that introduction, I am from Customer Success Unit. We do work with a lot of you as customers and partners to make your journey to Azure VMware Solutions easy. So with that being said, if you have missed Amy's and Liam's session yesterday, I'm going to quickly talk about the purpose of the whole next 45 minutes. So one of the areas we would focus to continue to discuss about is you may have priorities like data center exit, and you may have already been using Azure VMware Solutions and you have want to save some cost over it. And that is one. But main focus today, what we want to do is that if you are already a Azure VMware customer or planning to, actually I'll pause there. How many of you already deployed AVS? Love it. Big round of applause. And how many are planning to?
Awesome.
And also finally we'll have ton of demos, and part of it towards the end we'll actually show you how you integrate with AI as well. The seamless integration, you can build your own prompt engineering as well. With that being said, I'm going to take another step back. First of all, for Microsoft, for bringing fabulous customers, partners across the world to Ignite in Chicago. Hope all of you are having fun. If you are having fun, again, big round of applause to Microsoft and you. So with that being said, what is Azure VMware Solutions for 20 seconds or 10 seconds is, some of you already know what is VMware technology, what is virtualization. In that case, it fits right in. You don't have to look for new solution or new skill set. It is the easy way for you to get into Azure. And that is one of the main, and we can definitely look through the other benefits as well. There are a ton more. As we go through, we will talk about it. And at Microsoft, we do stand by 3 nines service level agreement. And with that, we do actually provide, comes with 3 nodes, or you can do more than that. When we give you that, there are some other additional items which I will continue to discuss on why 3 nodes and how you actually benefit out of that. With that being said, before we go into big architecture diagram, it's always better to start small, where you can see on your left, your customer side on-premises environment. On your right, it's at least for me on my left, on right. So on your side, I think it's the same. If not, please adjust. Where the Azure VMware Solutions, and also you can see in the second box where you will see Azure Services. That's where we are going to focus more and showing you all the tips and tricks. And you will see we are using Azure Express Route. If all of you, many of you raised your hand that you're using, either you can use Express Route or VPN for your connectivity. So, how many of you always think about resiliency? Raise your hands again, right? Exactly, 90% of you are actually doing it. So this is exactly one of the architectures where you can see, one, you have a primary region for AVS, secondary region for AVS. How do you talk to in between? We use global peering, VNet peering, as you can see in the middle. And also, you have 2 on-prem data centers. So in this way, for your architecture, you are getting, we call it crisscross. One of the express route goes down or some unplanned outage happens or whatnot, you are still covered. So your resiliency requirement, either it is high availability or across regions, we are thriving to give you a resilient solution, and that is the primary goal, kind of showing you how you can achieve that. And for you, all of you to achieve that resiliency goals, you might ask, okay, do I have to do AVS to AVS? Obviously not. There are many solutions. We want to meet where you are, rather than telling this is the only way. So you can see here in the slide, we are talking about you can use AVS to AVS, either or third-party solutions like Zerto and Jetstream, apologies for that. And when you do these solutions, and we kind of, it is a decision for you to make, okay, I do want to get downtime of RPO, RTO, or I want to use it, I don't want to spin up the AWS node, but I do want to use it as a blob storage. Wherever you are, or however the cost-effective solution you would like to go with it, and we have it, and all of this comes with the AWS already. Now, we looked at the resiliency. Now we looked at, you can achieve resiliency not just with AWS, but using third-party partners as well. Now, the next question is, okay, yesterday Liam, Amy said that how you can build your beautiful AWS house. Today I said how you make that house more resilient. Now you need to make that house to actually have more capacity, so that where either you want to use NetApp files for your NFS, or you want to use something like VMFS, where Elastic SAN is your requirement, kind of a blob. Or I did work with some of the customers where they have said, I want to use pure storage because I'm using that at on-prem. So that flexibility is also there. Again, my bullet point there is we want to meet where you are instead of telling this is a way. With that being said, the next area we would focus on is, I'll just share a personal story. I was a VMware admin almost like 11, 12 years. And if you share the same story, please smile or give some signal, is that whenever there is a blade goes down, I used to get an alert, run to the data center, pick up the blade, put it in, make sure that racked and everything, right? But in this case, you don't have to do any of it. Microsoft got your back. We take care of your physical infrastructure. So that is exactly most important thing, is that you can look in the responsibility metrics, what we do, and we want you to go and innovate and build a lot of great things. So that's why we are taking care of it. How it is done? In the next slide, we do host monitoring for you. And also we do automated host remediation, something where we will go ahead and replace the host if it has a faulty node. Our engineering team, some of them are here, and you can ask them how it is done, but it will be done for you. And also we set up service health alerts. With that being said, so far we have seen the resiliency story. Now you know how to connect the storage. Now you know what we are taking care of for you. And now we want to give you the tools. How do we get you actually accelerate in the journey, so that way either you write PowerShell, Bicep, Terraform, infrastructure as a code. How many Terraform lovers are here? Awesome, Bicep. Okay, I think we can get more numbers, but anyway. So my demo is going to be on Portal and Terraform, and I will ask my friend Husam to help me out. Okay, so we do have an open source automation. As you can see, one Portal option is there. You can see the Bicep option and Terraform option. So I'll quickly jump through the Portal option, where it's not primary purpose of the landing zone or our tooling is that not just build the AVS. We want to give you that bells and whistles come with it, where you can look for your monitoring requirements, security requirements, logging requirements, and also networking. How many of you have to make a decision, hey, can I use my existing VNet? Can I connect to my different VNet in a subscription? All that. In the demo, you can see we will give the IP address, and also we will build Gembox. With just a click of it, we will build you a Gembox, so that all of a sudden, once you build AVS, you can connect to AVS and through using the Gembox as well. And in this demo, you are seeing like where we will give you the default alerts. Even if you don't want some of them, we will actually give it, because we want to make sure you are also covered when there is a host memory goes up or down. Same thing we are doing for the logging. And quickly jumping into the Terraform, now many Terraform colleagues are here, where you can see the same thing we are doing. We are giving the /22 IP address, then we are giving the /24 IP address as well. You do need a /22 for AVS. And after that, in Terraform, we will go through many of the things, but I do wanted to call out, like you can add add-ons, you can add Elastic SAN, and also Husam will demo you all about DNS, and that is also you can configure your DNS forwarders here. And finally, which you could not do it on the Portal, was the identity integration, and you can see global reach connectivity for your express route. All that is already built for you. Either you can take this as a module, put it into your CI/CD pipeline, or you are adding a new cluster, a new host, everything is available for you to consume. And the beautiful thing is, it's all open source. And I know Sandeep, he's actually putting all the links in the chat. So if you do miss them, just go there and you will have all the links as well. And please give us a feedback. You can open GitHub issues there as well. Okay, you're just building Terraform init and apply. The beautiful AVS will be ready for you. Okay, going back to slides. Now, I'll take a break. I'll pass it to my friend Husam. He'll come back and show you some awesome things. Then again, you have to see me. Till then, see you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prasad. This was really helpful to learn a lot about AVS. Fantastic. Well, let's jump here to some different aspect of AVS, is how you can modernize your workloads running on AVS. So you already migrated or planning to migrate, and you're going to move your VMs all to Azure VMware Solution. Now, what's next? What's your art of possible there? What you can do with it, right? The main thing I want you to understand from probably the next 15 slide is that it's not an and option like AVS or Azure. It's not an or option. It's an and option between AVS and Azure. You definitely will be integrating Azure VMware Solution at the host layer with Azure services like networking, the basic plumbing to get it working in your environment. After you get that done, you can actually focus on your workloads running on top of AVS, and that's where you can focus about modernizing your workloads with the Azure services. And we're going to go deeper on that. This is just basically scratching the surface here. As you can see here, we have a plethora of services that we can integrate today with Azure VMware Solution. From a governance to monitoring, networking, storage. Prasad mentioned all these storage expansion services we have today, migration tools, operations management with Arc and others. We'll talk about Arc in a little bit. Also security integration for Defender in Cloud, firewalls, private endpoint, which is actually going to spend a lot of time on it on this presentation today, and also our business continuity and disaster recovery solutions we have on Azure. But that's not only that. We also have services available, as I mentioned previously, to modernize your applications running on Azure VMware Solution. And we have a lot of services today in Azure to help you with your modernization journey. From AI, machine learning, analytics, compute, storage, database, you name it. We have that in Azure. We have 200+ services today to help you modernize and innovate with Azure. This here's a few examples so to get you an idea. You can expand your storage at the guest layer with Azure Storage, or maybe use Azure SQL Managed Instance to host your databases, or use Cosmos DB, or even AI services. All these are common examples that we're seeing customers today taking advantage while they're still running on AVS. They might still have some dependency on VMware environment. That's totally fine. But they can still really harvest low-hanging fruit services available to them, taking advantage of the proximity being in Azure. You have to think about Azure VMware Solution and Azure services as siblings living in the same house under the same roof. They can communicate, talk to each other securely. There's no boundaries. This is another quick example I want to mention here. SQL Managed Instance, for example, that's where you can actually move your database to that service, where you have your application running on Azure VMware Solution. And the switch to that is actually very seamless. There's no downtime to your application. You can harvest the best of both worlds in this case. Another common example, we're seeing a lot of customer on-premises are using Oracle databases, and you know a lot of them. Are any of you using Oracle databases here in this room? Awesome. OK, great. And that's really a good success story for you. You can actually, I'm guessing you're using some VMware environment to host your VMs for application. So you can definitely migrate your VMs or workloads running on the VMware environment to Azure VMware Solution and bring your databases, the Oracle ones, on the Oracle database at Azure service. This is all the better together approach to help you really stretch your environment and move to Azure services with also Azure VMware Solution. Now I'm going to take a different aspect of operating and managing your environment through Azure Arc. We want you to be able to governance all your workloads, regardless of where they are, and manage them from one single control plane. We want to have unified operations, regardless of where you are. You could be in Azure today. That's Azure native, very simple. That's built in with the Azure control plane. But what if you are still on premises, Or you already moved to Azure VMware Solution. Keep in mind, Azure VMware Solution still is another VMware environment. Pretty much looks like on-premises, right? So how you can extend the control plane of Azure to this environment so you can rule them all in one place? That's through Azure Arc. Azure Arc allows you to stretch the control plane of Azure everywhere. So eventually you can governance your environments, and there's no second-class citizen. All your workloads are first-class citizens in Azure through Azure Arc. And you can see here, we eventually bring all these workloads up to the Azure control plane so you can manage them. One of the common questions I also get from customers and partners asking me about the confusion they get with Azure Arc, because we have Arc-enabled vSphere for things like AVS, and they also have Arc-enabled servers and SQL++. So basically, eventually, when you start building your Arc journey in modernization, you start with Arc-enabled vSphere. That's your first step. This will help you see your VMware inventory from the Azure APIs and portals. And from there, you can onboard your workloads at scale to Arc-enable them that are running on top of AVS. That's your next step. And from there, you can actually manage your VMs as you manage your Azure native VMs. But these are VMs still running on Azure VMware Solution. You can have self-service capabilities like starting them, stopping them, resizing them, even deploying them using Terraform and ARM templates and Bicep templates, all that in one place. And you'll discover a full environment from the Azure control plane. But that's not only the only case. Once you Arc-enable your VMs running on AVS, you can integrate with Azure services to help you manage those environments. One of my favorite use cases for Arc-enabled VMs is using managed identity. How many of you in this room knows about Microsoft Secure Future Initiative, SFI? Any of you heard of that? Security is top priority for us today. And we want you to authenticate to Azure services from Azure VMware Solution environment without using keys or passwords, because that will definitely expose your security posture. Using things through Azure Managed Identity, and that's going to be part of the next demo coming soon, I'll let you know how you can actually authenticate to Azure storage services with no keys. And then, of course, you can monitor your VMs, use Azure Monitor, Sentinel, policies, Defender for Cloud, Update Manager, all that is available once you Arc-enable your VMs running on AVS. Now, I'm going to briefly talk about security. There's a lot to talk about, we cannot cover probably everything here, but in Azure ecosystem, we have a lot of services to support your security posture for your workloads running on AVS. We have Entra ID, we have multi-factor authentication enabled, we have used managed identity, we'll talk about that more. Then you can also talk about data protection through Azure Key Vault, Azure Confidential Computing, et cetera. We have all the network services you need, firewalls, et cetera. And then we also have threat protection through Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And we allow you to manage your workloads and events and security posture through the Microsoft Sentinel service. Not only that, we also have a lot of partner solutions available to you today to help you manage your environment. From an AVS perspective, we also allow customer-managed keys, so you can centrally manage your keys, rotate them, revoke them, and comply with any FIPS requirements that you have today from any industry. And there's also a centralized way that you can actually bring your syslog from VMware environment to Azure Monitor, and from there actually integrate them with your login analytics and Microsoft Sentinel. You can also use Azure Alerts and Actions to alert on your environment. Now let's go deeper and talk about how you can connect securely to Azure services. So because, as I mentioned before, your AVS environment, your Azure services living in the same house, that allows you to take advantage of the proximity between those services, and you have low latency. You can manage things or take advantage of things like availability zones to actually make things really live in the physical house so they can have high throughput, low latency all the way. That exposes you to high performance and private connectivity. And again, as you mentioned before, there's 200 services to innovate today with Azure services you will be connecting to. Again, this is more probably technical slide here. I'm going to walk through it briefly. As you can see on the far right, that's AVS environment or AVS private cloud. And the left side, this is your Azure virtual network environment and all the Azure services that you have there. Once you establish this connectivity between AVS today to the Azure virtual network through ExpressRoute, this allows you to have dedicated connectivity with a high throughput. And next, as I mentioned, you would use availability zones to try to put things together to avoid any possible latency. While you're putting it in an availability zone, you ensure there's a minimal or even almost zero latency there. And then we can talk about private endpoint in a little bit. That's also allow you to securely connect and privately connect to Azure services. Another option is subnet delegation. And if you're trying to expose or reach out to your workloads running on AVS from the internet, you can use services like Application Gateway. It also has WAF capabilities, firewall capabilities, to filter all the traffic coming from the internet before it actually hits your VMs on AVS. Now, the good news. We're here to talk about the good news today. Azure resources do not need the internet to talk to each other. And that's the focus here in the next coming slides. One of the common services that allow you to make this possible is Azure Private Endpoint. Can you raise your hand if you ever used Azure Private Endpoint in the past? Fantastic, that's great. Okay, for those who haven't used it, it's basically allow you to have a network interface for your Azure services in your virtual network. And you get a private IP address, and with that private IP address, you will connect to the service internally. And the benefit for that is obviously it blocks any data exfiltration. It allows you to have private access and predictable IP addresses for ease of governance for your workloads. But private endpoint is probably not enough. You might use it with the private DNS zones, really to make it a real case end-to-end DNS resolution connecting privately to Azure services. Once you are deploying the private endpoint, you will then eventually deploy the private DNS zone for each Azure service. In that zone, you actually will have an A record for your services. So you have a resource with an A record pointing to the private IP address, and that IP address is the same address of the private endpoint network interface. And then to make that private private DNS zone functional, you have to link it actually to your virtual network, and that's when it starts actually working. And to extend the network DNS resolution to Azure VMware Solution environment, you need to use services like DNS Private Resolver. This will help you to forward all the DNS traffic coming from your workloads running on AVS through conditional forwarders to the Azure provided DNS service, which eventually allow you to resolve the private IP addresses of the machines. This is an example here for you to illustrate things. So what you see in the top, I'm running NSLOOKUP. This is from a VM inside of AVS, trying to reach out to a storage account. As you can see in the first part, I can get the private IP address of that storage account, and that's our goal. At the lower part, I do this DNS resolution outside of AVS, maybe from my laptop, and I still get the public IP address. So you can see here, when I have private endpoint enabled with the private DNS zone, I'm actually getting private IP addresses for the services. Now let's jump to the fun part and show you the demo here. All right, so you see here I have some VMs deployed into Azure. I have actually 1 Azure native VMs and 3 Arc-enabled VMs. Those are the green ones. And the demo VM is the one we're going to jump to later to actually show you the rest of the demo. But before that, I'm going to jump to my storage account. Simple. I'm going to go to networking and disable all the public network access. You think this will break things? Not really. Let's move on. Now, the next thing actually I'm going to do is deploy the private endpoint by clicking New Private Endpoint. I'll provide the required properties like name. And the service I want to actually use in this case is a blob service. And I'm going to select which subnet I'm going to put this private endpoint network interface in. So I choose my subnet from here. I choose, yes, I want to deploy a private DNS zone for this storage account, for example. And the rest of it is just like filling the tags and reviewing my configuration. Now I'm creating the service as we go. 4 resources will be created: the private DNS zone, the private endpoint, the private DNS zone link to the virtual network, and the A record we talked about before. So that's what you see here in the deployment. Once this is done, we can actually jump in there to view the resources that are being created. So this is the private endpoint. Next, I can actually click on DNS configuration and view the network interface that was created with the private IP address for the storage blob service. But that's not only it. If we scroll down a little bit, we'll see the private DNS zone that was also created there. I'm going to actually click on it so I can see what's in there. Under that private DNS zone, I'm going to go to the record set and see that a record that was created having the private IP address of the storage account. Right, this is important. And then the other important piece is to link your private DNS zone to your virtual network. This is just a troubleshooting thing. I want to give it as a tip for everyone if you ever had this problem in the future. If you look inside your virtual network, now you can see your services connected at network interfaces to your virtual network itself with private IP addresses. So this environment is connected to AVS. And for DNS resolution to come from AVS, as I mentioned before, we need inbound endpoint in your DNS private resolver. So I'm going to have actually a conditional forwarder inside of the DNS VM on AVS forwarding all the conditional queries coming to Azure services to this IP address here. Now I'm actually going to log into the jump box through Bastion. And you can see actually I'm going to protect my password through Key Vault. That's another integration we can have here. I'm going to log in, and I'm now in my jump box. As you can see, I have my VMs. Again, this is vCenter for those who haven't seen vCenter within AVS. And this is my DNS VM here. And you can see I have that IP address of the inbound endpoint I mentioned to you in the previous steps. Now, let me jump to the VM that I want to do the demo from. This is, again, application VM. Imagine it running on AVS. I have a simple PowerShell script that actually will upload a file. I have MS-Ignite PNG file. I want to upload it to a container, blob container on Azure. Now, what really actually want you to really understand or pay attention to this at this point is this login mechanism. I'm actually using connect AZ account-identity. That's what I was talking about before when I mentioned managed identity. I'm not passing any keys or connection string to connect your storage account. I'm logging with the VM identity that's ARC-enabled to Azure. And that's the beauty of it. So we cover the networking plane through the private endpoint, and we will cover the identity plane with the managed identity. So let's continue here. So as you can see, I did DNS resolution for the storage account. I get private IP address. And next thing, actually, just to make it work, is create container. I'm going to upload the file. And then I can actually download the file. So you can see, like, I was able to download and upload. But that's fine, right? So this is basically wraps up the demo. And I hope you got the two things that we covered, the identity plane with managed identity and the networking plane through private endpoint. I'm going to switch back to these slides and continue with the presentation. By the way, if you're actually wondering about the demo environment that was actually logging into it, this was a demo environment. AVS on the right side, I have those application DNS VM. I have services on the left side that have private endpoints enabled. And then I have my private resolver in Azure and jump box in Azure. And that's how I was able to log in all the way to the environment and do my DNS resolution. You can also see here the private DNS zone linked to the virtual network. And that's actually the end goal that you would achieve to have this private connectivity. All right, let's move on. By the way, I want to show you one last thing before I move on. Sorry. I want to actually show you the DNS flow of how things was working in the demo I showed you. The application VM trying to access storage account by name, by the fully qualified name. From there, it's going to go to DNS VM. DNS VM has a conditional forwarder, sending it the query to the private DNS resolver inbound endpoint. From there, the resolver will actually forward queries to the Azure-provided DNS. This 168 IP, if you never heard of that IP, I recommend all of you to read about it. And this Azure platform-provided DNS would actually look up this private DNS zones that are linked to this virtual network, and we'll find the A record for the storage account, and that's how it will eventually return back the private IP address of that storage account back to the application VM, and that's how your application VM connects to the storage account privately and securely. Now, the last piece of our presentation today, I'm going to start with the introduction and going to hand over to Prasad in a second. I want to show you how you can actually modernize Azure VMware Solution workloads with Azure AI services. And it all starts with your data. You've probably done the migration. You moved your data to Azure VMware Solution. And now what's next? How I can make better decisions in my company? How can I use my data? How can I make my application AI ready? Those are the questions that you'd be thinking of once you are hearing in Ignite a lot about AI. OK, how can I make this apply to my corporation or my organization? How this works. So we start with bringing your own data. You have AVS. And then you can actually bring data to different Azure data sources that we have today, like Azure SQL, Azure Storage, Cosmos DB, et cetera. And we have those Azure AI services like OpenAI and Azure AI Service. And then you have your application, which you're trying to build, or you try to extend with Azure AI capabilities. And the flow would be like, OK, I'll bring my data from Azure VMware Solution to Azure Services. From there, I AI enable them, and that's where I can have my smart application working. And if you take a look about how you can incorporate domain knowledge from your data with AI, there's always 3 ways that we talk about. Prompt engineering, that's when you provide the chat model in AI, the context and the question, and from there it will actually give you the answer. This is the basic mode, right? And it's not really giving you much out of your data because you have to feed it every time manual data. A better way is actually do fine-tuning, where you use your base model, like GPT-4, for example, and you train it with like 200 examples from your data, and it will be smart enough to start answer specific queries based on the data it actually learned. But the best thing, actually, which is probably you heard a lot about it this week and maybe in the past, the RAG model, or the Retrieval Augmented Generation model, where you actually bring your data, index it, and vectorize it, and that you'll be using that with Azure OpenAI models, for example, and then from there, your application will be able to send the queries to retrieve the results from like the indexed information, and with the question back to the LLM model to really resonate it and send it back to you in the context that you wish to get. From there, I'm actually handed over back to my dear friend Prasad to walk us through the demo of how we actually make it work with Azure VMware Solution workloads. Thank you.
And thank you, Husam.
Thank you.
And actually, some of these slides look so beautiful. A lot of hard work goes to Liam and him. They make it look so beautiful. So great presentation, though, Husam. With that being said, I know one of the friends asked me why the socks and hat is here. The only reason after the session, just ask us a question or just come by. We love customers and partners. We will give it away. That's it. No hard work. Easy peasy. So now, so far, the journey has been where we started yesterday on how do you build AVS beautiful house. Now, how do you make it resilient? Then Husam spent a lot of time, how do you make it secure? Now we are innovating with AVS using RAG model is one of the example we are showing here. As you can see, as a user, you would ask from your application, mobile phone, you would just ask for the orchestrator to go and get some query and content, and the retriever will go use the Azure search, and also it retrieves the information. Then it goes to Azure OpenAI, where it actually augments, then generates a response, which we will actually demo it to you, where we have some product feedback, good feedback or bad feedback. You will see that. And the answer comes back. This is where you are actually you are training the model. It's not like you're not using the open source ones. You can, but here you are actually giving the data. It could be your organization already has some data. You want to train your own model. With that being said, actually that's a happy smile. Love it, love it. Next. So again, we kind of talked about how that, and in this case, we are taking a customer where Azure VMware Solutions, and you already deployed SQL inside it as a data source. And also then you have an application gateway, which actually you will use during the demo. I'll talk about it, where you will configure your backend, connectivity, front end, everything you will use app gateway. Then we will configure Azure AI search as your data source. Then after that, we go to Azure OpenAI, and we will check the data source, how it is working. You like it, thumbs up. Then, or if not, you go back and again fine-tune your Azure AI search. But in this demo, at least it works because it's not live. So let's look at it. Okay. And I'm going to leave 5 to 7 minutes for questions. Please do ask us towards the end. So as you can see here, as I said, this SQL is running on AVS. And there you can see where it is. I do need to show that the actually database has content. I'm not faking it. The data is there. You can see it. Right? Yes. Select top 1,000, 100. What did I write? Yeah. Yes. So you can see the summary, what is a good quality food, and the data exists. We will use that. I think Husam is doing some magic. I don't know how to do that, but okay. Now we are into the portal where I said next step is to configure your application gateway, where application gateway we will go ahead and we set up your backend connectivity with your SQL on port 1433. Then you would set up the connectivity with your front end. Then you merge both of them using the application gateway. It will take a few seconds to finish those steps. While we are waiting, please look at the screen and ask me questions if something doesn't make sense in the demo.
Why an application gateway if you're using port 1433?
What is that?
Why an application gateway to a SQL backend? Seems odd. Why wouldn't you just use a load balancer?
Very wonderful question. I definitely want to, we want trying to get a secure connection into that. So if I don't use application gateway, there is no, actually my demo is going to run faster, but I'm going to answer that question again. Apologies, my friend. You are my best friend. Okay. Then coming back to Azure AI Search, that's where I'm going to actually connect the data sources, where you would see AVS review, and I will attach the same data source connectivity from the SQL. Once I have that connectivity, now you have the SQL, now you have application gateway for your security, then you have the data source. Now you actually go to Azure OpenAI, and that's where you will go ahead and deploy your prompt engineering. So in this case, the RAG model, we will open the prompt engineering, and you will see in the chat where we will test it out to say what is the feedback we are getting before we even deploy it to the customers or your organizations. And where you will select the data source as Azure AI Search, that's what we did. Then we will select what kind of response we want when we do the connections or conversations. That will also be selected part of the demo. And please get more questions while the demo is moving. Where you will see the search type, the next, then we'll get the API key, and save and close. That's it. Bingo. Done. Now we will deploy it to production and see the actual output. What are the good reviews for oatmeal products? If you're an oatmeal person, that's what the RAG model says. Don't quote me, that's what the RAG model says. Okay, next, when we actually satisfied with what are all the responses we see, on the top you will see we are going to actually deploy this as a web app. And there you can actually now, because the model is learning and maturing itself, it will actually give you what are all the next prompts. That's why AI is much, much smarter. Okay, again, what are some good reviews for oatmeal? And you will see 5 references. And the citation 1, I did not have oatmeal for a long time, so I don't know, but. Okay, actually, we are asking for bad reviews too. So we can learn about basically, that is the gist of it is we can configure the RAG model with your AVS and how you can innovate with AVS. Hopefully that demo makes sense. And we can switch back to the slides.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, next. Oh, okay. So with that being said, I spoke for a lot. I hope we did not put anybody to sleep, but there's so much documentation we have out there, and whatever we have shown, nothing is hidden. Mostly what we have done is in our CAF docs, in our product docs, the automation links will also be shared. Everything is available for you today to consume it. And you can innovate, and at Microsoft, we do also provide some ways to help our customers and partners. There is, you can go to Azure offerings and learn more about essentials and how we can come and help you with the migrations as well. Lot more details out there. And as I said, these are all available for you to take it action today. Actually, there should be one more slide I want. First of all, thank you again. This would be one of the slides I will leave everybody on. Please give us the survey how we did it. This is most important. My name is Prasad. His name is Husam. I'm signing off, but I'll take a lot of questions and give the gifts.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay.
Now we'll take the questions if anyone has questions.
Yes, sir.
Please.
So right now we're on APS. We're
migrate to AV64, that we got to like deploy a whole new cluster and then use HCX to migrate. Why is that? Why can't you just add AV64 nodes to your existing cluster and just use vMotion to migrate your servers?
Do you want to ask here or?
Did everyone hear me?
Oh, good, good. So if I summarize the question is you want to use AV64 to expand your nodes.
Well, yeah, I guess to migrate to higher performance servers, right?
So you already have AV, sorry, I'm getting echo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Saying if he has an existing AV36 cluster, why does he need to deploy a net new cluster with AV64 to migrate to those servers?
Got it. So there are few things we are working internally to, one, the capacity and the new generations for some of the products. So AV36 at some point, we have to move fast forward to say that, okay, we are using XYZ hardware model, we're going to move to that one. So the engineering primary goal is to go towards the new hardware. So that's where the investments are happening that, okay, we are going to move forward with AV64 and whatever the versions come in, that is the only decision because it's going to benefit many customers because AV36 at some point, the hardware could go end of life.
No, yeah, I don't think you understood though. The question is, right, why do I have to set that up as a completely new cluster versus just adding the AV64
Oh,
to my existing?
okay, got it.
You
Motion
want me
versus
to
having
take that?
HCX.
Got it.
Yeah, because technically we don't allow mixing different SKUs in the same cluster. So each cluster has to be its own SKU. So that's kind of the answer for that.
Thanks, Alex.
That helped.
Great
Makes
question.
sense. Yep. Other question? Yeah, go ahead, please, sir. Yes. You're winning. Best practices. Going to the mic.
Okay, I'm going to use the mic.
Perfect.
Freddie from NetBank.
Nice to meet you.
First, I've got a complaint. I've got a problem that
Great question.
I've got an express route direct. And when we set up the AVS solution, I had to get another express route direct for that solution. So I don't understand why I can't use the other one. And if you're connecting to Azure services, what you're showing is connection through express routes. Is the peering costs are related to that when you start consuming Azure services when you're on VMware Solution?
That's a great question. Actually, we suppress any billing that happens internally within Azure using the express route. This is like our way of connecting things, and we don't want any customer to be reliable for that, so we don't worry. Like, it's free. Yeah, that's a simple answer. Yeah. Great question.
More questions. We're happy to answer. Go ahead.
I've got one.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
please.
So how come when you use the run command to set up, to run the PowerShell scripts, to run, let's say, the new identity source, that it doesn't add that identity source in NSX as a user?
So you want to integrate with LDAP directory?
Yeah, so it works.
It works, but it won't add it in the NSX.
It creates a problem because our US colleagues, they configured it manually, so you can see it in theirs. In the UK one, LDAP authentication works, but the user doesn't show up because I ran the run command.
So Darren, I'm going to put my engineering team on spot for that. Sudeep, he has a form also to be filled. Sudeep, if you take that question and help us, that would be great. That's okay. Darren, but so to answer your question, we'll get you the right answer, but that is actually something we already been proposed that it needs to be seamless. Today, it does require for customers to go ahead and manually do it. I think the Power CLI in NSX is what we need to really get the Power here run commands to synchronize with. We did put the ask around it. Obviously, I cannot give any time frames, but yes, we do know about that. Thanks for raising.
I mean, it works.
Yeah.
It just causes an issue for follow the sun support. Because if the US are trying to support our environment, they may go into NSX, look for the user for LDAP and go, it's not there.
Yes.
Well, it does work. It's just we did it a different way.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you deserve a hat too for understanding us.
I need a hat. Have you seen it outside?
Oh, yes. It's very cold outside. You definitely need it. Yes.
Thank you.
And others, please go ahead.
AVS support Azure native backup. So the workloads on AVS.
Yeah, because we tried with maps and all those things. So
Yes.
isn't support, right? Yeah.
Yes. Here's the answer.
I'll always like first row. Right. Please. Hi, Rob.
Yes, please. Can you please use the mic, please? Just if I may ask.
So on private links, let's say with one private link, you go ahead, you set it all up, conditional forwarder, and you're all set. So how
Right.
if I have 10 private links? Each
Yeah.
one is different, each domain, that means I have to collect
That's my last.
10 conditional forwarders?
No,
Thank you, thank you.
just one. You will have one private DNS zone that will have multiple A records. Let's say you have
private
10 storage accounts.
Ah,
Each one will have its own A record in that private DNS zone. The conditional will only forward to the inbound endpoint of the private DNS resolver,
Yeah.
and it will use that private DNS zone. So you don't have to create 10 conditional forwarders.
Actually, we are running out of time, but we will take the questions outside. I do have another theater session. Husam mentioned about Azure VMware Solutions, Oracle together. I do have a theater session in about 15 minutes. See you all at Theater D. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.